Hi, my name's Mark Burks. I'm a professional sailor and a Yachtmaster instructor with nearly 250,000 miles now logged. Today on Free Sailing Tutorials, we're going to look at passage plans and how to construct one.
Yeah. Right, can we have a ferry? Yeah. What's the trick here? Irina, good afternoon. How can I help you?
Preparing a passage plan is no more than a formal visualization really of the voyage you intend to take. And in familiar waters, simply running through the passage in your head is a great way to highlight specific issues or potential areas that require more consideration and or preparation. That said, making a more formal plan and actually writing it down helps you to establish what information needs to be collated and helps you identify hazards and risks and summarize and distill relevant and important data. We all know from our school days that putting things down on paper helps us to crystallize our thoughts as well as highlighting our workings. Also, if things do go wrong, having evidence of a carefully prepared passage plan can be very useful, especially if the insurance company or the authorities become involved. Under SOLAS 5 regulations, there is now a legal requirement for the skipper going to sea to compile a passage plan. We can all get into difficulties at sea, so preparing to avoid as many pitfalls as possible is just common sense. So how do we prepare a robust passage plan? The first thing is to harvest as much relevant information as we can. This will include estimates and assumptions, of course, but if you start with approximations, the plan will slowly form into something more robust. First of all, we need to establish where we are going and leaving from, so our arrival and departure ports. Then decide on the best time to arrive at that destination. In an ideal world, if sailing to a port I don't know, I'd usually like to make landfall about 1 hour before sunrise. This allows me the benefit of seeing lights and lighthouses on approach and then having daylight for the port entry. Of course, this might not always be possible and it's tide dependent. If the port is not deep water one or that has a strong tidal gate at its entry, you're going to have to deal with that. Once we know the approximate route, we can work out the approximate distance, and then using an average speed we can establish an approximate time that will be taken for the passage. Of course, on longer voyages you cannot know better than within a few days what your ETA will be, and even on shorter trips this may vary if tides have a significant impact, or you find you have the wind on the nose, when don't you, or no wind at all, in which case allowing for the use of the engine to maintain your average speed over ground whilst on passage might be prudent. To estimate boat speed, you need to know your boat or know someone that can advise you. Most small cruising yachts probably average about 5 knots on passage, but this can vary dramatically depending on the conditions. Then check tides and currents and the weather forecast, both area specific and further afield. The forecast of course might change between when you make the passage plan and when you plan to leave, but tides will not. A look at the large-scale synopsis of the weather maybe 3 days ahead will have you better understand what is expected, and if the reality differs from the forecast, you have a better chance at understanding why and what effect this will have on your plans. Once you've considered tidal flows and heights, you may have to tweak your departure and estimated arrival times because of tidal heights, tidal gates and average speed over ground after tidal effect. So once we have this data, check the charts in more detail, and by reference to the information they offer, you can now start to move accurately and plan your voyage by setting out specific waypoints on the chart. Your waypoints should be chosen to keep you away from dangers and with careful consideration of forecast wind direction and wind speed. You should also be looking out for things like ferry routes and potential navigational hazards such as traffic separation schemes. Once you have an understanding of the tidal flows, you can accurately plan how long the passage is likely to take by applying a better estimated speed over ground, and amend that still further by applying the likely effect the forecast sea state from tide and weather predictions is likely to have on your distance and on your cruising speed. You now have a relatively accurate idea of what your passage will look like if the weather and other variables such as departure time remain as planned. At this point, work back down the route, referring to the chart and the tides and weather forecast to make sure that you do not arrive at a known tidal gate, such as a narrow channel or a headland, at the wrong time. And by adjusting your plan, you will eventually decide the best time to leave to allow you to take the best advantage of the tide and make the journey as pleasant as possible by avoiding wind against tide scenarios wherever possible. Then mark out the waypoint on your chart or on your chart plotter, and if you are using electronic charts, now is the best time to input your route. This will make life even easier. In an ideal world, you will leave on the tide and sweep effortlessly through every tidal gate, arriving at your planned destination in daylight, ideally a couple of days after sunrise. This will allow you to refer to shore lights and lighthouses on landfall, while then being able to identify further landmarks and main entrances to ports, etc., as you arrive. If you manage this, you will make your passage much easier and less stressful, especially when entering a port that's new to you. Once you have the navigational aspect covered, you need to address other variables which have just as much relevance to your passage plan. For example, if you have a sturdy, long-keeled, deep-sea vessel, you might decide a bracing force 6 is just fine for your 60-mile proposed trip beating to Weymouth. In a lighter displacement family cruising yacht, you might consider discretion to be the better part of valor. But your vessel's seaworthiness is not just defined by construction, condition, the centre of gravity and stability, even if you know it's robust. Knowing you have a robust hull is only of limited comfort. It's also important to know that you have a satisfactory choice of sail plan, and for more challenging passages, knowing you have a sail wardrobe in good condition, deep third reef in the main, a set of storm sails, storm boards, and maybe a drogue or sea anchor will give you great comfort, especially if you are caught out across an area such as the Bay of Biscay, for example. Check the engine's fuel consumption and your vessel's fuel capacity, together with its cruising speed under sail and engine, and of course, check its safety equipment and check all critical spares and tools are on board. Test communication equipment, for example, do a radio check, and make sure everyone has a fitted life jacket and harness, and that they know where the life raft is and how to launch it if you're not there. You should also remind them when to launch it and to make sure they take everybody with them if they do. Knowing your vessel will help you make go and no-go decisions, but you will also need to be confident that you have a competent crew. So you should take a good look at your crew. An exhilarating, rewarding passage for a fit, sea-hardened crew of experienced sailors can quickly become, at best, a horrendous and frightening experience, and at worst, a dangerous one for less capable sailors. When considering crew and crew numbers, the type of passage, type of boat, the length of the passage, weather forecast, and tidal streams should be carefully considered. As skipper, you will need to know that the crew are right for the passage and that you are making it as easy as you can for the crew and the vessel alike. You would obviously choose your crew based upon knowledge and experience necessary for the voyage, as well as for their joie de vivre. All crew should receive a thorough safety briefing both on deck and below, and then be allocated roles during the passage. As a bare minimum, make sure to brief your crew on boat's main systems such as gas, fuel, water, engine, deck layout, various alarms, how to use the bilge pumps, etc. Make sure that at least someone else can start the engine, send a mayday, and know what to do in the event of a man overboard. Also allow for changes that might be foisted upon you if a crew member goes down with, for example, seasickness. And whilst on the subject of the crew, you must keep your crew fed and watered at all times, otherwise you will not only lose efficiency and morale very quickly, but you won't have them coming back to sail with you again very soon. Make sure all relevant crew know how to cook, what to cook, where it is stored, and where it will be served. A detailed watch plan identifying the times of watch change, who's on which watch, when meals are served, and who does what and when will make this regime fair and simple to implement. Now you have a passage plan, but what do you do if things go wrong along the way? Well, as part of your passage plan, you should have made alternate plans for ports of refuge. These ports should be noted in your plan, and ideally you will have a choice of ports that are accessible in various conditions and hopefully at most states of tide. Remember, strong onshore winds can quickly make a port entrance hazardous, so think about alternatives when planning your passage. Make sure you have pilotage plans for each port entry and you've noted particular rules for entry and communication. Check the almanac before you leave, that way you won't be surprised when the port you've been sailing to for a while in that onshore gale is closed when you get there. Once you have a passage plan, make sure you keep a written record of it, perhaps in the back of your logbook. Make sure you brief your crew properly, both before you set off and when underway, and set out an appropriate watch system for the passage. You should consider informing a contact on shore and your home marina or the Coast Guard of your plans and let them know when you leave and when you arrive safely. Don't forget the latter. In the UK, the RWA have developed an app for this purpose. I will show it over here, and it's worth investigating that. It's quite useful and makes full use of smartphones, GPS and 3G technology. Make sure that before you leave you're fully victualled, in other words you have all the food you need for the journey, and don't forget gas, matches and toilet paper. If on a longer passage, make sure to check all of your crew's paperwork and take their passports and keep them safe in your secure grab bag. If necessary, keep a separate note of any medical issues pertaining to specific crew. Make sure to keep that private, and keep that together with details of their next of kin's contact information and a note of where they keep their medications. You should also have contact information ashore for all members of your crew, including yourself. Finally, make sure to update your weather forecast before you leave, and if all is well, enjoy a planned, stress-free passage. Thanks for visiting Free Sailing Tutorials. If you'd like to see more of our free tutorials online, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Facebook page, or alternatively go to freesailingtutorials.com, subscribe for weekly updates.